Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in this week. We got a great issue of The Issues for you, and we're going to be talking about what's going on around the world, focusing predominantly right here on Toronto, Canada. Some of the issues in Toronto we'll be talking about is Rob Ford's possibility of being removed from office. We'll be talking about part 2 of the 4-part series on how to deal with a traffic ticket. We'll be talking about education in Ontario, Canada as a whole, and we'll also be talking about the weather and entertainment. But first of all, I want to focus on the U.S. Republican election, which is basically ongoing right now, and we'll be deciding who runs against Barack Obama in the November election. I believe it's October, November. And what I want to talk about here is JFK. Now, about a week ago, Rick Santorum came out with a statement basically accusing JFK of saying no religion is allowed in politics. And in the speech by JFK, it was said that all religions should be allowed in, no matter what faith or background you come from. If you're an American, you should have an opportunity to serve the people, no matter of any religion you are. Now, Rick Santorum, however, interpreted this as saying there's no place for religion in politics at all, where most people would understand it as a certain equality statement saying no matter where you came from, no matter who you are, if you're born here, you can be president. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because everything in this world is subject to interpretation. And when a law is written, it removes a little bit of the interpretation, but it's up for the prosecutor and the judge and whoever deals with that law, whether it be a city councilor, member of parliament, or so on, has to interpret it to serve the people and not their best interest. And that's something we have to focus on, is serving the people and not the best interests. But I just wanted to say quickly that JFK came out with a lot of great statements, and the Republicans are actually sifting through a lot of his stuff, because if you are not really familiar with the space program, it was JFK that took Sputnik and turned it into Americans landing on the moon. It was JFK that had so many great speeches that right now seem to be pulled apart by the Republican Party, and it doesn't seem to be a negative sense on JFK. Some things are positive, some things are negative. It's just now, 50 years, 60 years later, we're interpreting this stuff, and are we interpreting it the way that it was intended to be? So let's quickly also move on to world affairs, because Russia just got a new leader. We touched on that last week. Now I want to talk about Israel and Palestine. Now, in the last week, we've seen salvoes going back and forth between Palestine firing rockets at Israel and Israel planning airstrikes against Palestine. Now, this has been going on for over a week, and to be honest, it's going on for about 60 years now. Now, with the continuing violence in Syria and the uncertainty going on in Iran, we have to sort of sit there and think, is it time for us to start a new plan of political action and sort of try to bring talks again to this part of the world? And the answer is yes. Overwhelmingly, the idea of not having diplomatic relations with the Middle East and not working on some sort of resolution where not only we are satisfied, but they are satisfied in some way in the end, is the only way that this planet will ever come to a sustainable peace.
Hello and thanks for watching. We hope you are enjoying this week's show. If you or someone you know has something to talk about and would like to get it out, come on an episode of The Issues. Please call or email the number on the screen. Once more, thanks for tuning in this week, and we hope to see you next time.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Now I want to talk about City of Toronto, City Hall. And now we're going to talk about 5 years ago, our mayor was Ward 2 Councillor of Etobicoke. And while he was the Ward 2 Councillor, it is alleged that he wrote down on City of Toronto public letterhead and sent out requests to private organizations in order to get them to make donations to a football program. Now, first of all, I want to talk about the donation part, because out of all the things in the world that we could be mad about, helping children in need is probably not the best thing to get upset over Rob Ford about. But more importantly, a lawyer, a prominent lawyer from the Toronto area, is basically filed a complaint against him and is working to get him removed from office or make it so that he can't run an election for another 7 years. Now, as he's been mayor, he's been asked to pay back the $3,100 that is alleged that is what he collected in donations. He has been reluctant to do so, and recently in a vote, it's been decided that they will reopen an investigation into this matter. Now, Whether or not this draws attention to real issues that will be coming up, especially here in the province of Ontario, with the next 2 weeks, we have the provincial budget coming out. And then 2 days following that, the federal budget coming out. And in 10 days from now, we'll be finding out whether or not Local 79 is locked out from its job. Is this really an issue, or is this going to end up just eating up time so that we're not paying attention to the real problems that our city is facing? So when you think about it, when you hear about it in the news and when you see it, maybe it's time to sort of sit there and think, hey, is this really an issue that we need to be discussing? Or should we be focusing on getting things done with transit? Should we be focusing on, cleaning up this 22 councillors versus 44 councillors at City Hall? And I want to touch on that really quickly. Now, there's been a lot of talk about removing half the councillors from City Hall. Now, unfortunately, there's 2 ways that this can happen from my understanding. One is the provincial parliament can basically oversee it and force it upon the conventional municipal level. However, with the relationship between Dalton McGuinty and Rob Ford, that seems rather unlikely. The other way is 23 out of the 44 councillors can vote to lose their jobs. Now, the possibility of that happening is about 1 gazillion to none.
Hello and thanks for watching. We hope you are enjoying this week's show. If you or someone you know has something to talk about and would like to get it out, come on an episode of The Issues. Please call or email the number on the screen. Once more, thanks for tuning in this week, and we hope to see you next time.
Hey everybody, welcome back again. Now we're going to do part 2 of the 4-part series on how to deal with getting a traffic ticket. In part 1, we quickly dealt with going to the courthouse and filing your ticket, what to do when being pulled over, and so on. Now we're going to move on. It's 6 months later. You've received your court date in the mail. What do you do? So on the court date in the mail, it says blah, blah, blah. On this date, you appeared here, you committed this act, and so on. Now, on this date, you have to appear in court in order to deal with your matter, 60 Queen Street, 1530 Markham Road, 2700 Eglinton Avenue, or if you're not in the Toronto area, one of the other wonderful courthouses in the province of Ontario. Now, so you've gotten your date. What do? All right, so you go to the courthouse, you go to the prosecutor's office, and you fill out a disclosure request. Now, the prosecutor will provide you with the original request form. You fill it out, you submit it to them, get them to photocopy it, give you a copy, they keep a copy, and within a few days, months, or weeks, you will get a call from the prosecutor of Ontario or Toronto, or depending on the level of your infraction, and they will provide you with all of the evidence against you. Now, this is the most important part for the convicted, or not the accused, better said. Now, if you have been accused of a crime and you have filed your disclosure request and you've received your disclosure request before trial, review it very carefully, look for any discrepancy, and if you see something that is worthwhile of asking for more information about it, don't hesitate to do so. Go back to the courthouse, file another disclosure request. If the matter goes to trial before you've reached a disclosure, request the matter be adjourned, and wait for your disclosure. If the matter reaches over 1 year plus a month, you are entitled to a charter motion dismissal, which is something we'll discuss in part 3 of the 4-part series. But focusing here is with disclosure. Okay, disclosure is the Crown's evidence against you. And if you were, let's say, pulled over for something that is not typical, every police car has a dash-mounted camera in it at this point in time. This started over the last 2 years, and now they all have it. So you are very well entitled to request the dash-mounted camera, and that will provide proof beyond a reasonable doubt of your guilt or innocent, depending on whether or not you are guilty or innocent. But I'm trying to tell you it's in your best interest to make sure you get that disclosure. Apply as soon as possible. The whole process with legalities has to do with due diligence. So if you're the first person to request the disclosure, then the onus falls on the prosecutor to provide the disclosure. If the prosecutor does not provide it within a reasonable time, then Section 11B of the Charter states that you are entitled to a trial within a reasonable amount of time. So it's up to you to make sure that your rights are met. Now, if you want to know more about what to do in the next step and trial and with regards to maybe appealing, I suggest you watch part 3 of the 4-part series of how to deal with a traffic ticket.
Hello and thanks for watching. We hope you are enjoying this week's show. If you or someone you know has something to talk about and would like to get it out, come on an episode of The Issues. Please call or email the number on the screen. Once more, thanks for tuning in this week, and we hope to see you next time.
Hey everybody! Now we're going to talk about education right here in Toronto, and the reason for this is the provincial budget, that basically says how much money the province of Ontario is going to be hemorrhaging into the near future, is up for discussion in about 2 weeks. So we're going to talk about education because in order to fit this budget, Dalton McGuinty had to make a request to the teachers not to take a salary increase for the next 2 years. Now, for someone that's been or has had the job for 15, 20 years, this might not bother you as much. But if you've only been a teacher for 2 to 5 years, this might make it impossible for you to buy that home you were looking at or to move on in your personal life because you were expecting to get this pay level and now you're only going to stay at that pay level. And this is something that sort of has to do with like the mandatory sentencing and so on. It's where one size doesn't necessarily fit all. Some people have to be more understanding of others. But more importantly than just talking about salaries of the teachers, I want to talk about education in whole. Now, another issue I have with the education system is if we look back to the 1940s, or let's say 1900 to 1950, the state of evolution in terms of technology and intelligence was far beyond what it is today. And I mean that by in the year 1900, we had a car. Okay, by 1950, we had tanks. Okay, to think about it like this, if you look at 1930, we had, biplanes. You look at 1940, we had the V1 and the V2 rocket. Now, let's look at 1950 to 2010. What has really evolved? Have we made the world a better place? Have we improved on the technologies? Have we come out with new technologies? I will say we have improved the technologies that were founded over the Second World War. But the question I'm asking is, why was it so easy for these people of that time period to develop new technologies, and it's so difficult for us? And I think the problem lies in education, where once back in the 40s, it was encouraged to think outside the box and it's encouraged to learn. Now I think it's more so in the line of the government to give people as much knowledge as they need, but nothing more. Don't encourage those people that are beyond the regular average of intelligence out of fear maybe we will get another Hitler, or maybe we will get someone that doesn't use their overwhelming good knowledge or knowledge for good. Now, the reason that this is important is our species is dependent on evolving. The only way that this planet will survive eternity is if the sun ceases to grow, and that's not going to happen. So our species as a whole has to start colonizing. And I don't want to badmouth Newt Gingrich because I'm actually a fan of the idea of putting in a lunar base. I think that if we're going to ever go to another planet or Mars or whatever it is, that it'll be much easier to transfer stuff from here to the moon and then to launch from the moon where the gravitational pull is much low. It'll allow the astronauts to keep far more energy on the ship when going that great distance. But the truth of the matter is, and this is going to touch back to the beginning of the program, is we really haven't had that kind of ambition since the 60s. Now, that was 10 years after the Second World War ended. You have to ask yourself, what happened in the last 60 years that made us so docile that we don't want to explore anymore? The only person on the planet right now that's exploring is James Cameron, and he's going to the depths of the ocean when space is the final frontier.
Hello and thanks for watching. We hope you are enjoying this week's show. If you or someone you know has something to talk about and would like to get it out, come on an episode of The Issues. Please call or email the number on the screen. Once more, thanks for tuning in this week, and we hope to see you next time.
Hey, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. We're quickly going to talk about entertainment in Toronto as we're probably in the line of getting a new casino in the next few months. Well, it'll probably take years, but it'll be started in motion over the next few months. Now, 3 casinos in the Greater Ontario area are losing their slot machines, and it looks like Toronto will be the benefit of them. Now, I want to quickly touch on the casino in Ontario Place because this is something that's very important. In Ontario at present, we're about 500,000 plus jobs missing from Ontario workers. And putting a thing like a casino in Ontario Place will allow to maybe put 3,000 to 5,000 people back to work. But more importantly, it'll allow us to test the idea of putting a casino in the actual core of Toronto and seeing if there is some sort of overwhelming outcome that allows us not to want to do that ever again. So, if the casino is a success in Niagara Falls, what's the flaw in sort of thinking about putting another one somewhere else in the Greater Toronto area? I don't know. Only the time will tell. But what I also wanted to talk about in this sort of entertainment segment, we're going to talk about the possibility of a second NHL team in the city of Toronto. And we're just going to touch on this quickly. Now, the Leafs have failed to get into the playoffs, which seems now for 7 years. And Toronto, as much as we still are diehard fans, are a little frustrated with this situation. Now, there have been a few reports coming out of government and coming out of media companies saying that Toronto can service a second team. In fact, the league itself can service several more teams. Now, let's say the Ontario Place Casino is a success, okay? If we wanted to, let's say, put a second casino in the Midtown area, and we were going to invest in that, would it really hurt us to invest as well into a second hockey team or a second stadium and a second hockey franchise? Hockey is our sport. And if you look at New York, you have the New York Islanders, you have the New York Rangers, and you have the New Jersey Devils. And right now we do have the Ottawa Senators and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But could we afford to get one more? And I believe the answer is yes. Anything that we can do in the city of Toronto to encourage a winning team from the Leafs is something that we needed to focus on a while ago. Now, before I go today, I want to leave you with this, okay? The weather this weekend is supposed to be remarkable. It's supposed to continue for a while. Now, global warming is an understatement at this point in time, and whether or not this weather continues and we see a overwhelmingly warm summer probably will lead to more hurricanes and more other natural type disasters in terms of the weather forefront. Whether or not that affects us here in Toronto, hopefully not any more than it already has. But what we have to sort of think about here is this is a big year because the sun is at an 11-year cycle peak. We have the 2012 winter solstice from the Mayans coming up. Is the world going to come to an end? I don't think so, but at the same point in time, who really knows? Dave Epstein, see you next week.